How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Steven Talks. And today I'm going to be talking about an experience I had that to this day I really have no real explanation for. Now, I've always been open to the idea that when we die, our souls move on, they go somewhere else. Where that is, I don't know. I don't know that yet, but I do feel like we don't just stop once our bodies die. Now, some people, I guess, their souls don't really go too far, and then you have things like haunted places. I I believe it. I believed it even before my experience. But what happened with me personally was back in about 2000, 2001. I was going to school at Barton College in Wilson, North Carolina. I was in the theater department, and our department was not very big at all. The head of the department, Bob, his office was in the communications building, which that in itself was very small. Our theater, where we put on our plays, was not an actual theater. It was this really small chapel, kind of situated almost in the middle of campus. This chapel had been there since the birth of time. And, it was a spooky little building made out of stone, all of that. But we put on our plays there because the chapel itself had a stage. Whoop, just had a cat jump down. It had a stage in it, and the audience did have to sit in pews to watch these shows. And, we made it work. It was all we had, and we put on some pretty damn good shows there. Even some really big musicals, like full of set changes and all these props coming in and stuff. But we did it. We squeezed all that stuff in the tiny backstage area. But to go into what happened to me is Bob, our leader, told us that the chapel had a history of unexplained occurrences. All of these occurrences were attributed to this thing that they called the Duchess. The Duchess was a lady that apparently loved to hang out in the chapel. I don't know anything about her. I don't know what her backstory was or why she's haunting that tiny ass chapel. But, Bob said that there were all these stories about people hearing things in the chapel, seeing things, doing dress rehearsals and stuff and looking up and seeing a woman sitting in the balcony, which always seems to be the case in like haunted theaters. There's always like, I looked up in the balcony and someone was sitting in the balcony. Like, even in the afterlife, they understand that those are good seats up there. Like, you get a whole view of the house from there. But Bob's story that he told that happened to him was that he was teaching a class in the chapel, an acting class. And when you took those classes, you had to sit in the pews themselves. Now, it's just like a regular chapel. The way that you walk in, there's a small little lobby, then these two big wooden doors that open into a chapel. You've got this aisle leading straight down the middle, pews on either side of you, and then a stage at the front of the chapel. So Bob is teaching the class. He's walking up and down that middle aisle, and suddenly something shatters behind him on the ground. And he turns around, and there on the ground are these pieces of what appear to be like an old teacup. Now, above the pews and everything is just basically like a vaulted ceiling that even for a tiny chapel, it's pretty high up there. And it's just a bunch of like rafters and wooden beams. So it makes no sense that a teacup would just come falling from one of those rafters unless, like, I don't know, a caveman put it up there or something like that. But he couldn't explain it. he thought it was really freaky. Apparently all the people in his class, they freaked out. They didn't know what the hell was going on. So yeah, we were always told about the Duchess. And it was just a fun thing to kind of scare each other with. But my experience happened one night. I was doing the show The Complete Works of William Shakespeare, which is a 3-person show where we did all of Shakespeare's plays in 90 minutes. It is a riot. It's hilarious. It's fast paced. There's no set. You run around grabbing props and costumes out of trunks. It's probably one of the most enjoyable times that I've ever had doing a show. But I think the night that my thing happened was we were going to be practicing a scene where I had to do a monologue. I think it was the "What a piece of work is man" speech from Hamlet. And for some reason, I got to the chapel early. Now, the campus always kept the chapel locked. So if you wanted to get in, you had to wait, or you had to like call campus security to come let you in. So that's what I did. And the guy let me in. And again, if I can kind of set the scene here, when you walk into the chapel, you have the front lobby, then you go in and you're going down the middle aisle, and then we had the stage. So if I'm standing on the stage now, I'm looking out over these pews in this middle aisle. Well, over to my immediate right is a doorway. And that doorway is this tiny little alcove. And if you were to go into this doorway, you're pretty much immediately met with a wooden door that leads outside. And if you were to open this wooden door, it made all kinds of racket, like creaks and all that stuff like that. If you were to stay in this alcove and not go out through that door, to your immediate right is going to be a stairwell that leads all the way down to the basement. And that's where our dressing rooms were. So just to set that all up for you there. But I went into the chapel, I cut on the stage lights, I'm standing on the stage, the whole place is quiet, and I'm going over my monologue. And as I finish a sentence, I hear somebody walking up the steps from the basement. And I can't stress this enough, how unafraid I was in that moment. I thought, oh, sweet, somebody else is here. Like, now I'm not by myself. And so I look over because I can audibly hear someone coming up those steps. Now, when you get to the top of those steps, you are in that doorway. There's nowhere to hide, and I'm standing on the stage with a direct view into that doorway. And I'm waiting for this person to get to the top of the steps so I can be like, hey, what's up? I'm here too. But the footsteps get all the way to the top and they stop. And whoever walked up those steps should have been in plain sight. And I waited a minute and I'm like, hello? Nothing. Silence. Now, there was 2 exits that person could have taken. They could have immediately gone out that wooden door to the outside, which, like I said, would have made a shit ton of noise. Or they could have silently ninja'd their way back down those steps. But as quiet as that chapel was, I would have heard something, even if they were trying to be quiet, because the sounds of footsteps were very audible. This wasn't the sound of somebody trying to be sneaky. This was the sound of someone walking up steps. And there was no one there. And I kind of went, hello? Nothing. And so I walked over to the side of the stage so that I could just really look into this alcove. And there was no one. There was absolutely no one there. There was no more footsteps. There was no more sounds. That was it. So I very nonchalantly just turned around, walked off the stage, and kind of did this quick little walk run out because I don't know. I was freaked out, and I felt like I didn't want to run out of there like full on Kevin from Home Alone. Like, because I figured like something might start chasing me. I don't know. Like, that was my logic at the time. But I walked out those doors. I went out to the parking lot and I sat on the curb and I pretty much chain smoked until the cast arrived and the director. And they're all like, "Are you good, man?" And I'm like, "No." Like, I am not going in there again by myself ever again. I'm not doing it. And I told them what happened. And I don't know if they believed me or what, but I don't have any explanation for that. I don't. I've replayed this so many times in my head. I've re-experienced it in my head, even telling it right now. And I don't have any rational explanation for it. Someone was walking up those steps. That much I know. Who it was, I don't know. But there was no one there. And there should have been someone there. Was it the Duchess? I don't know. I never saw anybody. That's the thing. Is that it's not one of those stories where you're like, I saw a figure and she was floating and chased me out. Like, there was just nothing but the sound of footsteps. That was it. Another cat jumping. But, yeah, I ended up doing, I think I did one more show there. I think we did True West. And that was it. That was it for my time at Barton. I left there. But, I went back to Wilson a couple of years ago with my wife because, I wanted to show her where I grew up because I grew up in Wilson. And was showing her my old house. And I was like, well, let me show you Barton where I did theater. And so we went to the campus and that chapel is still there. It's gotten a hell of a facelift. Like the back of the chapel, which used to just be the back of the chapel, now actually is a whole nother entrance going into that thing. And there's glass windows you can look into that now looks onto the back of the stage, which is really bizarre. But, I'm glad that they didn't tear it down. I mean, there's a lot of history to that place. And I spent countless hours in that little chapel rehearsing for shows and being around people that were a very important part of my life. But of course, after I left, the college decided that, hey, maybe people like going to see shows. So now the place has this huge theater that would have been lovely to have been a part of. But I don't know. I guess maybe I wouldn't trade the fact that I did these shows in this tiny little haunted chapel. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that's my I guess that's my ghost story. If anyone has a ghost story, that would be mine. I don't know. But if you've had an experience, let me know. Tell me about it in the comments. That'd be cool to hear. We can share ghost stories around the glow of the internet. But thank you for listening to my story. I can't wait to see you again so we can talk some more. See you.